Hey, classmates. Once again, it's Paul Hood. I decided this time to do my case study on the West Fertilizer Company explosion 2013 in West Texas. The reason why I chose this case study is because I remember a little bit about it, but I think it really hits home is the fact that when I started my career, I started off as a volunteer in a small area, so I feel like I can kind of relate to maybe what they kind of went through as far as responses and when you have limited resources, things that some career departments don't really have to suffer through. So when it goes to it, it talks about stage one is you're the mayor of the town. You're also a volunteer firefighter. Your town's about 3,000 people. You only have the volunteer fire department. And on April 17th, your department gets called out for the fire at the fertilizer plant. Talks about there's a nursing home, an apartment complex, playground, and a school nearby. Um, There's also apparently a 3 minute delay for dispatch from the time the call received to the time they dispatched the call because the street that the plant is on, fertilizer plant on, has three separate names. Why that was never addressed beforehand, I don't know, but that seems pretty important to me. Then about 22 minutes from the time of being dispatched to the time the department's on scene, that's when they start requesting some assistance. Some of the steps I feel like that they should have taken in the beginning part was pre-plan the chemicals at the plant, as far as any other kind of high-risk building in their jurisdiction. The book kind of talks a little bit about, I guess, the manufacturing plant as well as the company that was dropping off the chemicals was kind of not really forthcoming with some information about what all that they had there. They knew they had ammonium nitrate, but they guess they didn't really know the quantities that they had as well as any other chemicals that would interact with it. Another thing that they should probably know about would be if they had an issue at that facility, what their evacuation zone should be, blast zone, evacuation zone, that kind of stuff, as well as obviously automatic hazmat consideration. Um, and it's because it's in their town, you're going to have to call for assistance, so they should have had mutual aid agencies should have known about what was in this plan as well. As if not, dispatch center, law enforcement, any other agencies that would probably be involved with that. So stage two talks about that they actually stored about 100,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate at the fertilizer plant. They also had a rail spur line with rail cars on that could hold up to about 200,000 more pounds of ammonium nitrate. So then it talks about as the situation progresses, you're also the mayor. How do you kind of do the incident command? What do you do? Are you acting as a mayor? Are you acting as a firefighter? How does that role kind of look for you? And that's something that they didn't really deal with before. So some other considerations you'd want to look for is obviously the rail cars could be impacted, if not already. So as well as also airborne fumes in the neighborhood. I mean, you've got schools, nursing homes, apartment complexes. So you have people that could be affected, maybe not by the blast itself, but it could be affected by fumes from the blast, debris from the blast. Um, Stage three, plant explodes about 7:50 p.m. So as 15 people are killed in the explosion. 12 of those are noted to be first responders. Um, and 262 people were taken to the hospital for injuries. So in the town of 3,000, that's quite a huge hit. Um, as well as overwhelming for the hospital, overwhelming for the area, as well as now you had the explosion, you have debris everywhere. Um, People don't really know where to go, where to park at, where the extra firefighters are inside the fertilizer plant. Um, Eventually, an emergency management services director arrives on scene, and he's the first one to really establish a command system. So his first steps really should be to take back, reassess the resources he has on scene, as well as take accountability for resources. That way he can see, um, does he still have an engine company there? Is the engine company blown out of the water? He can kind of take a look back at that, as well as what does he need to request now. Obviously, search and rescue teams because you've had the explosion. The other thing to take a look for is more law enforcement to help kind of clear up the area as well as prevent people from getting there and evacuation routes. But then probably look at doing some federal briefings. You've had an explosion at a chemical plant or fertilizer plant. So obviously some federal people are probably going to have some questions to be asked, as well as probably set up areas for PIOs and local media and all that stuff. Then he's also got to take a look at what the community needs. Housing for these people that have probably been displaced by the explosion. Is the school inhabitable? Can they use the school tomorrow for class? or do they have to get it cleaned, or does it have to go home to school, as well as the emotional state of the incident on the community. Obviously, a smaller community, most people know some of those people that probably were killed, so they're affected by it. That's some stuff you got to consider. Um, Stage 4 kind of talks about you get some donations, dignitaries show up, media shows up. Obviously, you want to set up some teams to take inventory of the donations taken, as well as set up someone to probably meet the dignitaries, maybe corral them, keep them away from the scene. That way, they can kind of get with what they need. Can the dignitary help out with that kind of stuff, as well as probably consider the use of counseling services, and also setting up an area for the media to kind of meet at. That way, they're not kind of trying to get photo shots. They're not trying to come into the scene. They have one area to go to, and that's where you can disseminate the information to. Some of the information, when I looked up an article in Firehouse magazine about it, for the post incident of it, is that in 2015 they actually added a part-time fire marshal's position to the city, and his job is pretty much just do inspections and prevention, which would have been great to help out on. But like most things in the fire service, it comes after the fact. They've also developed a new pre-plan process. For what it sounds like and reads up is that they didn't really do anything for pre-plans, as well as start incident command system established. What we take for granted in the big cities is that everyone knows what's going on with the incident command system. We all know who's showing up. You get the small volunteer systems, and some of these people have never heard of incident command. They just kind of show up, do their thing, and leave. And every day no one gets hurt. It works great. But that one time it goes south, they should have had a system. They've also included hazmat training, which is pretty important because you have a fertilizer plant in your district. So there's some things that they need to think about. They developed some SOGs for responses. And because of the explosion, they actually lost a pumper, a tanker, and a brush truck, which they got a couple of them donated to replace their fleet. And then once they got insurance money and whatnot, they bought a couple of used pumpers. So they've managed to get their staff back up to their equipment back up to snuff where they should have been before the explosion. But like I said, to me, like I said, I read this one because I remember watching the news media about it, and because of being a volunteer before, I feel like this one really hits home. So I feel I feel like they did the best they could, just because of small town stuff. But we need to take a look at the big picture and realize that there was a catastrophe brewing. The fertilizer plant was 65 years old, so it was also non-sprinklered. And pretty much any zoning ordinance that they would have done recently, it would have been grandfathered in. So I feel like, it was probably going to be a lose-lose for them no matter what with the fertilizer plant. But I hope you guys enjoy this.